Welcome back. Today we're going to do something super fun and extremely useful. We're going to look at how to share data between view controllers. And to do that, we're going to build a simple sign-up form. First things first, let's create a new project, a single view app like we usually do. I'm going to name mine Icarus, but you can name yours whatever you want. Select a place to store it. I'm putting mine right inside the GitHub repository for all these episodes, which you can find right here. Next, let's delete the view controller class because we'll be creating our own. After that, we'll go into our storyboard and delete the generic view controller it has in there so we can start from scratch. Let's grab a navigation controller and drag it into the project. Delete the table view controller it comes with. Select the navigation controller and mark it as the initial view controller using the inspector. Then grab a view controller and drop it next to our navigation controller. Right-click on the navigation controller and drag the root view controller connection over to the view controller and drop it there. Let's find a label here in our component list and drag that onto the new view controller. Set the text to "What's your name?", the font style to light, and the size to 26. Now let's add some constraints to the label so its margins will always look right. Right-click on the label and drag to the main view and let go. Select top space to safe area. Now do the same on the left side and select leading space to safe area. And then again on the right for trailing space to safe area. You'll notice it adds these constraints as elements in Interface Builder. Select the left-hand side constraint and let's change that to a round number like 20. And do the same on the right-hand side. This is a sign-up form, so we will be needing a text field. Filter the component list for text, grab a text field, and place it below the label. Right-click and drag up to the label and let go. Select vertical spacing. This will anchor the text field below the label, regardless of how big that label gets. Let's anchor the left-hand side and the right-hand side as well. Tweak those to 20, just like we did with the label. Let's bump the font size to 26 so we can read it easily. Add a placeholder text. Placeholders appear in a lighter color until the user enters something. They're good for usability. Now, something that is really important about text fields is these text input traits. Don't forget to set these because an improperly configured text field can be quite aggravating to users. Set the content type to name, the capitalization to words, correction to no because autocorrect for names is more of a nuisance than anything else. The default keyboard should be fine for this. Now let's add a button. Drag that in and adjust it a bit. Set the title to next and bump the font size to 26. Set the text color to white and the background to this blue or whatever color you like. Now anchor the top of it to the text field just like we did before and set the left and right hand margins using constraints for leading space to safe area and trailing space to safe area. Let's tweak those values a bit. Set the left constraint to 20, the top to 30, and the right to 20. You'll notice that we now have a warning over here. Let's click on this warning symbol to see what the problem is. Sometimes Interface Builder doesn't automatically update element frames when you adjust constraints, and now is one of those times. Click on the warning symbol again here and select Update Frames, which is the default, and then click Fix Misplacement, and that should take care of that. Except now our button is too short, so let's add a constraint for its height using this anonymous looking little button down here. Set the height to 75, and then click Add One Constraint. Now let's clone this entire view for the second step of our sign-up flow. Select the view controller object in the document outline, and using Command-C and Command-V, we will copy and paste it. Then simply drag the clone to the right. Change this label to something else. We're going to update this label programmatically, so I'm going to set its default value to something that's obviously not been set by the code. I use underscores for that. So if we see that when the app is running, we know for sure the data is not being set by the code. Next, let's modify the text field. This one is going to be an email text field, so let's set its content type to email address, capitalization to none, and we'll change the keyboard type to email address. Now we need a way to transition from the first view to the second. Clearly this next button should do that, so right-click on that and select Action and drag over to the right view controller and let go. Select Show just like we did in the last episode. This creates a segue from step 1 of our sign-up to step 2. Now it's time to create some classes for these controllers. Right-click on this folder in the navigation and select New File. Select Cocoa Touch class if it isn't already, and click Next. Let's name this first one Sign-up Step 1 View Controller and make it a subclass of UI View Controller. Click Next or hit Enter, and enter again to stash it in the project directory. Now let's repeat that process for Sign-up Step 2 View Controller. We also need a model to store the data that we'll use to pass between view controllers. This time we will call it User and make it a subclass of NSObject. Back to the storyboard, where we will assign these view controllers to our controller elements. Select the first view controller and using the third tab in the inspector, set the class to Sign-up Step 1 View Controller. And now repeat that for Sign-up Step 2. Next, open Sign-up Step 1 View Controller in the Assistant Editor so we can assign some referencing outlets. Right-click on the label and drag New Referencing Outlet into the code and let go. Name it Name Field Label. Do the same for the text field and guess what we'll call that? Yep, Name Field. And finally, for the next button, do the same and call it Next Button. Okay, let's do all of that again for Sign-up Step 2. Now before we go any further, let's run the app and see what we're working with. Okay, it's running, so that's a start. Let's enter a name and tap Next. Here on Step 2, we want to say hello to the new user and ask them to enter their email address. To do that, we need to initialize our user object and update it when the user taps Next. Then we need to hand off the user object from Step 1 to Step 2, so let's do just that. First, we'll add a property to Step 1 View Controller. var user is a user. We will use the question mark to play it safe. Do the same for Sign-up Step 2 View Controller. Now let's add the necessary properties to the user class. Var name is a string, and var email is also a string. Now that we have a usable user model, we can initialize it in Sign-up Step 1. We will do that in the viewDidLoad function. Self.user equals user, open close parens. Now comes the moment you've all been waiting for. In order to pass the user object to the next view controller, we need to catch the segue in action. There's a function called prepare for segue that's included with all subclasses of UI view controller. Just type prepare and XCode should be smart enough to autocomplete it for you. Inside the function, we will grab a reference to the destination view controller. In this case, Sign-up Step 2 View Controller. The segue object passed into this function has a property called destination. We will use that and cast it as a Sign-up Step 2 View Controller. By default, it's just a simple UI View Controller, which isn't good enough because that won't have the user property we added earlier. Assign the user object from this class to that class, and now Sign-up Step 2 has a user. Hang on, we still haven't assigned the value of the name field to the user object, so let's do that up here. Self.user .name equals namefield.text. Now over to Sign-up Step 2 View Controller, and we can update the email field label to greet the user with their name. Hi blank, what's your email? We will fill blank in with the user object like this. Now let's run the app just to make sure we're handing off the data properly. I'll put my name in and tap Next. Success! Sign-up Step 2 has the name entered from Step 1 and is displaying it back to the user. We need to add some simple validation to the name field, so users can't get to Step 2 without entering a valid name. For simplicity, we'll define a valid name as 2 characters or longer. Go back to Sign-up Step 2 View Controller. I want to show you another segue method available to all UI view controllers. Type should and select should perform segue from the autocomplete suggestions. Thank you, XCode. Let's check the length of the text entered by the user like this. If namefield.text.count is greater than or equal to 2 characters. You might notice that XCode is now whining at us for not unwrapping the text property. Try letting XCode fix it. It'll then complain, that the entire left-hand side is optional, and if we have it fix it again, it wraps the entire thing in parens and adds an exclamation point to the end. This is not how you handle optionals in Swift. Here is how you handle optionals. If name is the contents of namefield.text and name.count is greater than or equal to 2, then return true, otherwise false. True means the segue will execute, and false means it will not. Let's test this. Try pressing next with an empty text field. Nothing, just as we want. Let's try just one character. Still nothing, good. Add a second character, and bingo, we passed validation. Now this silent failure is not great, so let's add an alert to the user so they know what's going on. For that, we'll use an alert controller. Let alert controller equal UIAlertController. I'm using XCode to autocomplete this as usual. Title is wait a minute. Message, please enter at least 2 characters for name. Preferred style is .alert. As soon as you hit dot, XCode shows you the other options. We need a button for the user to press to dismiss this alert. That's called an alert action. Let OK action equal UI alert action. Title is OK, style is .default, and the handler will be nil. Add the action to the alert controller, and then use self.present to present it. Animated is true, and completion block is nil. Now let's take a look and see if it works. Leave the text field empty and press next.
Now wait a minute.
Looks good. But this email field placeholder still says name, so let's fix that. Change it to you@email.com. Nice generic email address. Okay, that's much better. This is a good place to stop today. Maybe we'll add more in the next episode, but I think this gives you plenty to digest for now. Let's review. We learned how to work with text input from the user and how to create a simple validation rule to fortify our workflow. We learned how to pass data between view controllers using a segue, and we also learned how to make simple alerts with UIAlertController. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Always feel free to leave us questions you have about this episode or suggestions for future episodes in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.